All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Coffee Time with Byron. I'm your host, Byron. This is episode number 112. I am your gracious host. Alongside me is former MLB star, player for numerous amount of teams, including a rival in my division, the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'm not going to upset him for that. Matt Kata. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Happy to be here. Appreciate you getting my name right as well. I always joke. I think I'm a career 650 hitter as Matt Kata.
Oh, really?
At one point debated, changing it, but no, it's fun to be here.
I guess right. Honestly, I thought I never would have thought. What do you say? What'd you say? What they pronounce you as?
Yeah, Kata.
Yeah,
I probably would have hung up on. I probably would have hung up on you if you would have said Kata. So.
Well, there you go. I don't blame you for that one. So let's begin with according. I know this is bad results, but it is what it is. It's all I could find. It doesn't say or not. Were you drafted, undrafted? How'd that process go? Did you go to college, play college ball? Tell us a little about your background and how you decided to become a professional baseball player.
Well, I think you know enough about sports. I mean, I didn't decide it. It's decided for you. But yeah, so I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was drafted. I was drafted out of high school by the Minnesota Twins in the 20th round, but decided to go to college. So I had a scholarship to Vanderbilt University. So played 3 years at Vandy. It's definitely not the Vandy that we see now in college baseball, but it was still an awesome experience getting to play in the SEC. Getting to play shortstop, and I actually was a two-way guy in college. I pitched as well. I closed games and started Friday night games my sophomore year, and then after my junior year, I was drafted by the Diamondbacks in the 9th round and started my career in '99.
So, who were your inspirations growing up? Because obviously we all have inspirations on why we want to get into the game. So who was yours? Did you have any growing up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, obviously I loved, any Indian, and, I was imitating, all of them, in the backyard playing and during home run derbies or whatever with your buddies. Julio Franco, obviously one of the more famous ones as far as a batting stance. So I think I can do Julio Franco's stance better than Julio can do Julio. But and then outside of any Indians, I was a big Cal Ripken Jr. fan. Obviously, just the way he played the game and went about his business. On a daily basis, and obviously played every day and showed up. He was one I looked up to. And then, I just loved the game of baseball, and, I dove into the history of the game. So, it was great, obviously having, my dad be a big part of just helping grow the love of the game for me, hearing his stories about the Rocky Calavitos and getting to see, the Mickey Mantles play as they came through Cleveland, those sorts of things. So, I was always tuned into, not only the players that were playing while I was growing up, but definitely the guys, who played before me.
Now, do you think playing for the daunted SEC helped you get drafted? Because, like you said, Vanderbilt is in the SEC, and those schools are powerhouses in baseball and football. I don't know about basketball much, but I know the two sports, football and baseball. That conference is always loaded with talent. Do you think that helped you get drafted?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely didn't hurt. I think when you look at just back in you know that time, 1999. I mean, we didn't really have the internet. There weren't all these showcases. You know, basically there wasn't ESPN Plus where
Right.
I mean, every conference. I mean, I coached. When I was back in Cleveland. Recently I coached at my alma mater high school, and I'm able to stay connected with a lot of the guys that I coach who are now in some big schools like Duke, but some small schools like St. Bonaventure and even some of the Ivy Leagues. Um, so I think back then, the two big conferences were the SEC and maybe the Pac-10 as far as baseball goes. So on the flip side, I think it's also great now that I mean, kids' talent is being highlighted and exposed at all levels, and not just D1. And you get to you know kids get an opportunity to be recognized and seen. So I think that's the good part about the game right now, and kids who have that dream, just like I did, to play professionally and in the big leagues one day. And so it's cool to see guys even at the D3 level get opportunities, because back in the day it was the scout having to find the small town kid, or you didn't want to tell anyone about it, scouts hiding up in trees and those sorts of stories. I think that's not the case as much anymore. And so, but the SEC is still the top conference in baseball. So it was when you're playing against the best competition in the country and you're showing that you can you can perform well against that competition, it certainly helps your status.
Now, off the subject before we get back into it, did you ever want to go back to your alma mater and coach and be a coach for them?
I mean, I love coaching. I think the challenge as you get into your post playing career is the lifestyle that the lifestyle of coaches is it's almost worse than a player. Obviously a player, you're getting to the field early, you're putting in that work and time, and then you're going home and getting ready for the next day. I think coaches, they have a little more responsibility. They're almost on that same timeline, if not earlier. And so, it's something that I enjoy doing right now. I'm able to kind of scratch that itch and volunteer and help out with some organizations. And and then I have kids of my own. They're going to be freshmen in high school. I have twins. So family is really important. And I think it's a lot of guys obviously juggle it, but it's a little bit of a sacrifice. If I was to get back into any level right now. And so for me, it's, again, I enjoy it, but right now it's kind of a it would be a back burner, just wanting to be with the family and spend that quality time.
And I don't blame you there. Every precious moment, right? I don't blame you for that one. I know I got two of my own, so I don't blame you on that. So I feel you. One's going to be 7, one's going to be 3 this year. So I feel you. Spend every moment.
The cliche is real. They grow up fast, and I think it seems like yesterday mine were 7 and 3, and now they're 14. So
you know how it is. So tell us about the whole draft process. That whole leading up to the draft, after you, when you get the call that you're going to get drafted. Who called you? Who scouted you? Tell us about that whole draft process and how it went about for you.
Yeah, so I mean, back in '99, I knew I just was ready. to kind of move on, and when you were finishing up and throughout my junior year, you just heard random of, early rounds, third to fifth rounds. And, a lot of that's just talk. And, admittingly, I probably got caught up in it more than I should have. Obviously I can't control any of it. And the only thing I
Right.
can control is, how I perform on the field and prepare. And so, um, so the day is, you hear a lot of the stories. I mean, obviously I'm not, going to New York and in a suit and, waiting to be a first rounder. You hear about whatever rounds on day one and, so-and-so rounds on day two. So, it was one of those things when you knew it was draft day, you kind of just, you're sitting and waiting, you're trying to occupy, your mind and your time. And ultimately you're just waiting for a call. And so, I represented myself. I didn't have, it was me and mom in the living room and kitchen, just hanging out. And
Mm.
so there were a couple calls from a couple organizations, just trying to kind of feel out your signability, and, we might take you here or there. And then you finally get that call, from the Diamondbacks. And, Harold Zonder was the scout who, ended up drafting me. And leading up to that point, if you would have said the Diamondbacks, I mean, I can't even remember having conversations. They were just kind of out of the blue, um,
Right.
or organization. And so, yeah, so you kind of, again, ninth round, I knew, from a compensation standpoint, it wasn't going to be, huge money. You kind of had some advisors and you talked to some people about just, the whole process. And for me, it was just, you wanted to be just compensated fairly for whatever round um, you were drafted in. So you kind of go through that, really small negotiation. I mean, you still have a little bit of, I guess, negotiating, power being a junior. And so, a couple of conversations. And for me, I just knew, the way I looked at it, if you're really not a first rounder and in those slots to make big money, I knew, all right, I just wanted to start my career. And I knew, the any bigger money, right, would potentially come later when you get
Right.
to where your ultimate goal is playing in the big leagues. And so, it was, I think, a couple of conversations, maybe one back and forth, counter negotiation, just to say you played agent a little bit. And, I signed, 2 days later. And, I was, on a short drive to South Bend, Indiana, where I started my professional career with the South Bend Silverhawks.
Now, how hard was the minor league life? I know they have adjusted it now recently to where finally MLB is finally paying for minor leaguers to have the luxury of majors. What was that life bad in the minors when you, or just how it was before they changed it? Was it just as bad as everybody made it out to be, where you had to literally drive your own car, you had to get your own place? I mean, where the teams didn't pay for anything. Is that what you had to go through in the minors?
Well, I mean, I certainly, yeah, went through, you know, that whole first year, or really first year and a half. Um, I mean, at that time, making $850 a month before taxes, which essentially is, um, poverty and not much. And,
Right.
they gave you, when you went on the road, $20 per diem that technically was supposed to cover a couple meals. Um, there were things that you were provided, a little bit of, some sort of lunch, but, lunch when you're at home, in the lower level minor leagues was essentially, 3 loaves of bread thrown on a table and some jars of peanut butter and jelly that get pulled out after batting practice. So, I mean, if I had a nickel for every peanut butter and jelly sandwich I ate, I'd be a rich man after 14 years. But when you look back on it, it's tough because I think certainly some of the conditions weren't awesome. Some of the facilities weren't awesome, but
Right.
I think the whole point was I don't think I would give it up. I get that you had to make those adjustments, and especially nowadays, and they're definitely getting some better amenities and food and all those sorts of things that are really important. But for me, I think it was all part of, all right, I'm in this place wherever it is, South Bend, Indiana, Lancaster, California. I mean, I was fortunate to play in some of the nicer places.
Right.
There's the Clinton, Iowas of the world that, you just didn't shower at the at the clubhouse.
Yeah.
You just wore dirty clothes and showered back at the hotel. But I think it was all part of just what fueled your desire to not get comfortable where you were at, and to continue to work hard and focus on the things that you can control to help you either just continue to put up numbers and then move up, and ultimately you know get to the big leagues, which is as we know is it's not an easy thing to do. The odds are certainly not in your favor.
Yeah, I agree with that one. So tell us a little bit. According to this, you were a utility player, which is true. I've seen highlights of you to get me prepared for this. I did see highlights of you, and plus I watched around that era, so I have seen you play. You were a utility guy. Um, com- the role of utility, where you can play every position. What what's your mindset into going that? Is it different than actually playing just one position like a lot of players do? Uh, Tell us about that process. What's your mindset when you're a utility guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality with the utility player is nobody starts their career as a utility player. Everyone is drafted as the shortstop, which I was. And then as you kind of move into your career, you either make a move, over to the other side at second base, like I did, because whatever reason, maybe they don't think your arm is strong enough, or maybe there's just another prospect, or they just think that's a better path for you. So
Right.
for me, that was my move. I played basically my first year and a half as a shortstop, and then made the move to second base, and that was kind of my path. And in the big leagues, I broke in my rookie year in 2003, as a second baseman, and then 2004, um, the same, and so um, but I think up until then, um, I think the biggest thing with being a utility player is just overall general athleticism. When you look at guys who can play multiple positions, um, they're most likely the best athletes on the team. I was a two-way guy. I pitched. I randomly in the summer in high school playing summer ball. I would get behind the plate and catch. I tell a great story when I was drafted by the Twins. Um, the scout that drafted me, I mean, he obviously wanted to sign me, so he would kind of follow me around for, really was just about a month after the draft, while I'm still playing for my summer team in Cleveland. And, we used to play double headers on Saturday and Sunday. And so we had one catcher on the team. And so I would catch the back end. I would catch the back ends of double headers, and I was just imitating Tony Pena and,
Mhm.
just being athletic back there, having fun. And he showed up to one game, and it was the second game of a double header, and I was catching. And you're just having fun with it back there. And, you have some good players. So you're actually catching, good pitchers, and it's not, everywhere, and you're not blocking, a ton of balls. And so, he kind of got to see how I moved back there, threw out a couple of runners. And then, that was also the first tournament where I was just like, all right, I'm going to be a switch hitter. I'm going to just commit to switch hitting. And then I think I hit a grand slam left-handed, and he didn't even know I could switch hit. So, like, of course he kind of went, crazy. But, I think just, being athletic helps. And then, you know, when you're in spring training and you're basically just wanting to be a team player because the ultimate goal is to get to the big leagues. I don't care, what position it was at.
Right. Right.
And so I think, within an organization, when they say, hey, what about this? Or try to, let me throw you over here and you just get the job done. That's a big feather in your cap um, and I think goes a long way. And then ultimately from a career standpoint, if you can, show that you can play multiple positions and play them, average to above average, it's going to keep a jersey on your back, for a long time. And so for me, that was a big reason I was able to, play the, play the game for, as long as I did in 14 years. So.
You preluded to it before I brought this up. Your debut, obviously, like you said, was in 2003, June 15th, 2003 for the Diamondbacks. Tell us about that whole process and the story behind your call up. Who called you up? Where were you? And did you have goosebumps when you got called up?
Yeah, so I was in AAA, playing for the Tucson Sidewinders at the time. And so, the big league team was in Minnesota. And so, there was a little bit of the time difference. And so, we had 6:30 games in Tucson, and, it was a really nice clubhouse there because it was also the spring training site. And so, there's TVs all around. And so the game, two the two previous nights before I ended up getting called up, we're watching the game in Minnesota, on those TVs, and weirdly enough, there was like a random injury, like Tony Womack gets hit and he flops on the ground like he's, it's a big injury and he's going to be out. And so obviously the natural thing is, who's the next guy at AAA? When you get to AAA, it's a little more realistic of like, okay, I'm a step away. And so,
Right.
there's two random things where, something happened in the game that, oh, it might be you. Because at that point, I mean, it's June. There's already been a couple of my buddies who've gotten called up for, whatever reason. So now you're kind of seeing, all right, this is, you're on the roster. So, you're really close, you're so close. And so, that third night, it was a Saturday, again, watching the game and, I kind of like, I talked about it before is, I think the biggest like advice, and I think it was two things. I went through it my senior year in high school where you get caught up in the draft and you get caught up in things that you can't control. I definitely let it, happen a little bit my junior year and leading up to the draft. And you're thinking about, again, things that you can't control. And I think, those two nights and thinking about, oh man, it might be me and Tony Womack might be hurt or whatever it was. These are things that I can't control. So, that third night on Saturday, it was, right around 6 o'clock. I kind of had a routine that I had, pretty much every game, at home. I'm at my locker and I kind of hear this, oh, this big, like just sigh and they're, everyone's watching the game. And so, my instinct was to, get up and, what's going on. But, I kind of was like, that happened, the two previous nights and, nothing happened, nothing comes about. I got this game I got to prepare for. And so,
Right.
I didn't really, I didn't kind of let it, get my attention and focus. But, I kind of looked and I knew that, Junior Spivey was, legging out an infield single. And, I caught a replay of, his ankle on first base. And I mean, you've seen some bad injuries and you just kind of knew that's bad. And so again, no one's coming in yet to say, hey, whatever. And so I just kind of put my head back down, went through my routine. And, right before I was about to go, go down to the field, our manager at the time, Al Pedrique, he came and got me at my locker and just had said, hey, we don't know anything yet, but just for precaution, we're kind of taking you out of the lineup. You're not going to play, so just chill, right? So at this point, all right, a little different than the previous two nights.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
they're waiting on a decision. And then, 5 minutes later, he calls me in the office and says, hey, you're going up to the big leagues. You gotta, I think it was a 6:30 or 7 a.m. flight from Phoenix. We're in Tucson. So I had to get that night, they have a hotel room, get into Phoenix. Now it's like probably 6:30 or so, Tucson time. So, gather all my stuff, pack up, and as I'm driving back to my apartment, I'm like slowly realizing I have no clean clothes, and
Oh,
I'm probably wearing, probably doubling up on the pair of underwear that I currently had on, and so everyone asks, what did you do? Well, I mean, I didn't get into Phoenix probably till I think, there's excitement, that sort of thing. But I didn't get there until, I mean, probably 1 a.m. because I was doing, I think I did 2 or 3 loads of laundry. I didn't know how long I was going to be there. So I had no clean clothes. So I did laundry, got into, Phoenix a little after, 1 a.m. I don't think I slept, and then I'm on a plane out to, Minneapolis and, hopping in and I didn't get there until, I mean, it's a 1 o'clock game. I didn't get into the clubhouse until like 12:15, 12:30. So, which is like, for a guy that's so routine oriented and on top of that, had no clue where I was going. I got in a cab and I was like, in the dome, right? Like the Metro Dome and where the players go. And this, thankfully, this guy kind of had taken a couple players or knew exactly where I was, what entrance that was.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then you had to meet the person. And so, I'm rolling up while guys are getting ready to play a game. I didn't have the experience to take BP and to go through all that. I just had to like check in with the right people, see where my locker's at. I went from being number 64 in spring training that year to getting number 11, which was really awesome to see because that was kind of like a, just a weird family number. We all kind of had number 11. I had, I have 2 sisters and a brother. And, when we play sports, 11 was just kind of the number that we all liked. So, I didn't choose it. It was kind of given to me. So, that was pretty cool. And so now I'm, trying to just figure everything out and get dressed and, head down to, this really unfamiliar place I've never been to and, go sit and watch a big league game. And, knowing I didn't take BP, I didn't really stretch. I'm just trying to get loose and think it's an
Yeah.
American League game. We're at, interleague. So it's American League game. So it's not like there's pinch hitting and double switches and pitchers hitting. They have the DH. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking, all right, there's no chance I'm going to get in this game. And sure enough, late in the game, they send me out to go pinch run. And, I'm pinch running at second base in this, the Metrodome where, I mean, you've seen the old pics. I mean, a white ceiling and, it's just a weird, cool looking place at the same time. And end up pinch running and then scoring my first, run as a big leaguer. And then, I'm getting sent out to play second base, the next inning where again, you look up and it's this big white ceiling and you're, praying to God that you don't get a pop up or fly ball. And then I get my first AB and, I'm like inches from hitting a double, down the line and, end up striking out. And, and so this kind of whirlwind of just, everything from being called up and, thankfully, we're in Minnesota and then, we had an off day the next day flying to Houston. So I think that off day was huge just to kind of, get in all the calls and, call everyone who you wanted to call and, set everything up with people who want to maybe come out and so then, we had that off day on Monday and then Tuesday, I'm in the lineup there at second base, and next thing my first AB, grounded out to short, which is better than striking out. You make some
Right.
contact, you run
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
at
At least
first,
you
and
make
then
contact. Yeah.
and then your next AB, I'm kind of hitting a broken bat single over the second baseman's head. That the older I get, it turns into a smoked line drive, type of thing. And then the very next at bat, I hit my first, first big league home run. So, the start of my career was awesome. Being able to get called up and be plugged in and play every day, I think is huge, because that's what I'm just used to.
Yeah.
And and at the time we had some injuries, and then we had some of the young guys that I came up with, also come up and kind of just inject this little bit of, energy and youth. At that time, the Diamondbacks were, kind of were an older group, from a roster standpoint, obviously future Hall of Famers and
Right.
you know,
Right.
and really good players. But, we were able to kind of go on a little run. We went on a 12-game winning streak, which was awesome. We got back into, the wild card race and the playoffs, and so it was. It was everything about it was awesome.
Yeah. I'll get to that one, like what you said with, because you previously that too with the guys you were called up with. But first, I gotta ask you. Now that you mentioned your first single, your first home run, do you remember who that? Do you remember who the pitcher was that you got the ball that you hit off, and did you get to keep those balls?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember, left-hand pitcher for the Astros, Jeremy Robertson, which unfortunately he's not with us anymore. I think got in a motorcycle accident
Yeah, I
at
think
some
I heard that.
point. But yeah. So yeah, the first hit, obviously everyone knows. So you see it on TV a lot now, and they throw the ball in, and and then the trainer at the time, Paul Lassard, unbelievable like handwriting. So he kind of takes a marker or whatever, a pen, and kind of writes all the info on there. So that's pretty cool. And then the home run was, it was a good shot. It wasn't a wall scraper, so it hits off right below the train tracks in Houston, but then bounces back on the field. And so the left fielder at the time was Lance Berkman, who I ended up being a teammate with, and he's a buddy now.
Yeah.
He didn't know, so he just throws it back up into the Crawford boxes. And so so I think somebody tracks down whoever the kid was, who caught the ball. So after the game, I got to meet the kid and the dad, and they were great. I mean, obviously I'm not I'm not a it's not like Mike Trout's first
Right.
home run, and this guy knew. Yeah, this guy
Yeah.
knew. This is just
Yeah.
so it's not like they were demanding money. But at that time, I mean, I came up. I think I was able to jam two bats into my travel bag, and I broke the one and had to borrow another one. So I had one bat, so I didn't want to give the kid my only bat,
Right.
and sign it. So luckily, Luis Gonzalez kind of
Helps you out.
pinch hit for me, and I think the kid was a little more excited to get a Luis Gonzalez signed bat than
Yeah.
than a Matt Kata signed bat.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Nothing against you, just a bigger name. Yeah. Every kid's going to go for that.
Yeah, exactly.
No offense to you, even though you had a
No.
decent career. I mean, like you said, you just weren't a big name. So, but back to the stadium. Yeah, like you said, the white. I mean, when you debuted at the Twins, that was a football dome. Of course, like the white. When you played in stadiums like that, because that at that time there were still stadiums like that. How difficult was it for you as a fielder to track and see the ball?
Yeah, I mean every stadium, and that's the cool thing about just baseball. It's not, every stadium is different, and every stadium has their, little quirks, whether it's a wall, whether it's some crevice like in Houston, outfielders. I mean, you get to a city, and those first 2 days, for a player who isn't as familiar, you're out there early with the coaching staff, and they're either hitting balls off the wall, you're taking fly balls, into those nooks, or every playing surface is a little different. Grass is longer, dirt is a little different. So
Right.
anytime, and for me, obviously every stadium was new, so it was a lot of early work. A lot of a lot of great guidance from some of the veteran guys of just, hey, this plays fast, this plays slow. Or I tell the story all the time when I was with the Rangers, and was kind of that utility role. I hung around Mark Teixeira a lot, who was a great guy, and we opened up that year in 2007 in Anaheim playing against the Angels. And, at that time, their roster was the Sean Figgins, the, Alfredo Amezaga, like
Right.
the super fast guys who bunted
Yep.
a lot.
Yep.
And so he went to home plate with 4 baseballs, and he, rolled 2 baseballs down the first baseline. And I kind of just, I was out there early too. And I went over, I said, "What are you doing, man?" He said, "Come here, watch this." So he rolls those baseballs, and he kind of purposely rolled them foul to the right side of the foul line down the first baseline, and these things just banked back and rolled back into fair territory. And I said, "Oh my goodness!" And he said, "Yeah." Then he had me get down and lay down, and purposefully, the grounds crew would kind of pack up the dirt in the foul territory, and then
Yeah.
kind of bank that, so those bunts and those balls would roll back into fair territory. So third base side was the same, and that was just something that he did after a veteran or somebody told him about it. So it was something that I just adopted, and I passed along to even as a coach, and third baseman, first baseman, just to kind of do to see how kind of how the fields play. But I think that was also, again, even though you get called up, I mean, I think for me, I never took a day for granted, playing in the big leagues. And as serious as you took it, there were always the times where you're like, man, I'm in Wrigley Field, right? Or I'm, on the way down from the clubhouse to the visitors dugout. There's just like a random old school, like, cutout area with like a urinal, like no door, no nothing. And I'm just like, well, I remember, my mom's voice, like on a road trip, saying, "Go to the bathroom." And, I'm like, "I don't have to go." And she's like, "Just go, just try." I remember walking down the first thing, passing that thing, and it's old. And I'm like, man, this is the one time I'm going to try to go to the bathroom. Because, I mean, how many, the names who stood here and did the same thing
Yeah.
I'm about to do. So there were definitely cool aspects about just experiencing some awesome ballparks, and then obviously the cities that they're in. um, and I think at one point, I mean, when I finished my career, there were only two parks, because I played in the NL and the AL, that I didn't get to like play an official game in, and it was Camden Yards and in Fenway Park. Well, and Tropicana. The one year we played the Rays when I was with the Rangers, they decided to take that series and play it at in Orlando at the
Yeah. Why?
at the Braves spring train, just to try to increase the fan base. It was really weird playing official
Yeah. I think I
MLB
kind of
games that
remember.
counted.
I think I kind of briefly remember.
Yeah, yeah. So I
I
mean,
think so.
again, not that I'm missing much at Tropicana from what I hear. Kevin Cash,
Really
who's the
not.
manager there.
Even though they've
Yeah,
tried remodeling it, yeah. Even though they've tried remodeling it, which they don't get me wrong, they've done a good job with it. Yeah, it's not the best. I
yeah,
know
yeah.
they've tried remodeling it, but yeah, I agree. It's still a dump. Still a dump. And I live here,
Yeah, no, I know.
so I mean,
But
It is what it is. They're still fighting for a new stadium. I hope they get it, but with the owner, who knows? The owner's greedy, so I don't know. We'll see. Well, I hope
Well,
they get a new
it's still
stadium.
awesome to see him. Yeah, it's still awesome to see him just, I mean, playing well. Kevin Cash is a good friend of mine, and so I would absolutely love to play for him. And then I played Kyle Snyder, and
Yeah.
we played in the Cape Cod the one year. We won a Cape Cod League championship together, and then trained together for a couple of years in the off season in Arizona. So he's an awesome guy, and yeah, at least you guys are winning, and so it's not as bad.
Right, exactly. I agree. You briefly got into it. The guys that you got called up with, uh, Brandon Webb, young Alex Centrone, and a young Robbie Hammock, and you guys were all dubbed the baby D backs. Who do you know who dubbed you guys that, and why you guys were called that? And you think
Yeah,
you guys do you think that you guys ultimately helped you guys get to a wild card with that young leadership that you guys did? You think that helped you get to the playoffs that year?
yeah. I think I don't know who takes credit for baby backs, but obviously younger guys and with just some injuries and the need to kind of get some guys called up and guys who are essentially rookies with no experience. I mean, obviously, you know, some good players. I mean, I'm not throwing myself in there, but you got Brandon Webb, who ends up going on to win Cy Young, Robbie Hammock, who, I mean, just if he didn't have and battle those injuries, I mean, he's one of my best friends. So we are super close, and
And
injuries kind
I
of.
think he's on the current staff now too, isn't he? With the
He
Diamondbacks.
was at the time for 4 years. I think that they didn't renew his contract last year, so he's in the Pirates organization coaching.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, coaching A ball. But those are some good players who I think the moment um, didn't didn't get to them. So when we got called up, and I think that's part of, again, they know you as a player organizationally, and they know everything about you, and that, all right, we need guys who can come up, and they're not going to be not going to be scared of anything. They're going to handle themselves the right way and play the game the right way, and so those guys um, certainly were those types of guys, and immediately had an impact. And like I said, I mean, we go on a 12-game winning streak, pretty much right when I get called up, and it kind of changes the run a little bit, injects a little bit of energy, obviously into the team and into the fan base. So it was really fun, playing, that season as a rookie, and knowing that, you're impacting, you're in a playoff hunt. We ultimately didn't get to the playoffs, but up until the last couple of weeks or so, there was that chance. So, any player will tell you playing meaningful baseball is better than not. And so it was, it made it really exciting.
I know you can't contest to the other players because you don't know who they learned from, but out of all the veterans on that roster that you had, because like you said, you had a numerous amount of veterans, future Hall of Famers, etc. on that team with you. Who did you learn from the most out of all those veterans, or who helped you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think the couple names that really stand out. The first one wasn't even he's not even a position player. Matt Manti, was a guy who myself, Robbie Hammock. I think it was maybe we had the same agent, but Matt's just such a great guy, and I think he, when he got called up with the Marlins, I think back in the day, there was everything was just a little different, and so there's the whole stigma of, you don't speak until you're spoken to, and, that sort of thing. And so, he was
Right.
really good at, pulling us aside and kind of, showing us what were some of those things, right? Don't do this, do this. And I mean, it ranged from, you're a rookie, you got to be the guy who, fills up the, brown paper bag with beer to bring onto, the bus after every game. You kind of had your things. And for me, I never resisted that because I always felt fortunate, or privileged that I got to do that. That meant I'm in the big leagues. I'm a rookie. And, I think everyone knows as a rookie, you got to, pay your dues in whatever way. So he was a guy who just, really took us under his wing and made sure, we weren't kind of doing things we weren't supposed to be doing, and just, and everything from, here's how you tip the clubhouse guys, here's how you treat the clubhouse guys. So he was, unbelievable. And then, when you get onto the field, I mean, even back in spring training, Craig Counsell was a guy who, I didn't love him because he's scoring the winning run and jumping up and down against my Indians in '97.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
But I knew the type of player he was, and very similar, to myself. So, I was kind of that, almost like that young brother, excited to be in my first big league camp and, asking 1,000 questions. So I'm sure he was a little annoyed with me as he's trying to, prepare. And then obviously, I'm ultimately on his heels trying to take his job. But he was always great at just going out of his way to, talk about this, talk about that, whether it's a tip or, again, something about the game. He was outstanding. It was awesome to be around, Matt Williams, who, again, he was injured at the time there, but he meant so much baseball knowledge and always willing to, to kind of share it. And then, Mark Grace was another guy who, I would grow up, watching on WGN, and,
Yep.
obviously Mark Grace is Mark Grace. And so, the best story that I have that year, when you kind of like, it sits and settles that, like, oh man, I made it, I'm here. So when we were at home, after the game in the clubhouse, Mark Grace would kind of, he kind of had a locker in one of the corners and off one of the corners. So he would kind of, almost hold court after every game. I mean, he loved his Coors Lights. So, they'd have Coors Lights on ice for him. And I mean, obviously he was a, smoker. And so, I mean, he's smoking in the clubhouse, and he's got, an ashtray there. And, a lot of the veteran guys would just pull their chairs around and they would just, talk about the game and talk baseball. It was awesome. And so, I was always kind of the last guy out of the clubhouse throughout my career, no matter where I was at. And so, I was always still one of the last guys out. And I always, remember looking over there just like, all right, that's a circle. And, it'd be cool to, what are they talking about, and this and that. And I remember this is probably a couple months into, being called up and playing well. And, I was 33, I think, for my first 100, in the big leagues. And so, I was playing well, and obviously, we were kind of back in the hunt. And, I remember getting ready to leave, kind of leave. And, he yells over, "Hey, Kate, pull up a chair." And so, I mean, I got to kind of get in the circle and really just, I mean, at that point, I didn't say anything. I just listened, and, we certainly talked about a lot of baseball, a lot of life and everything, that goes with it. So that was a super cool moment, for me, of just, hey, it's all about, for me, the players that you're playing with. And I think ultimately, earning and gaining their respect. And so for me, who was just, happy to be there, playing well, focused on just, doing what I can for the team, that was a big moment for me where I knew, all right, these guys, they respect me as a person, as a player. And so it was, a really cool thing.
So this is going to be a two-part question. I remember because the Braves were at the time on TBS, just like the Cubs were on WGN still. I remember this time very well because I saw this game because there was nothing else on. The Rays were, I think, off, so they didn't have a game. Marlins, I think, were off already as well. I think so. I think the Braves were the only ones on, and I can't remember if you played or not, but he was your teammate, Randy Johnson, and he threw. I think it was a perfect. Was it? I can't remember if it was a perfect game or no hitter. I remember it. It was one of the two. Did you play that in that game? Were you there for it? And
Come on,
TV
Byron. Come on. Can't
and TV
remember.
and TV don't do justice. How big of a person was he really? TV don't do justice how big because he was over 7 foot, right? I mean, how tall was he in person?
No, I mean, I think he was all of 6'10" or 6'11", whatever his baseball card said. But yeah, I mean, I'll never forget that night, May 18th, 2004. It just passed, about a month ago. But yeah, I was playing. It was perfect game one, so let's clear that up. Which obviously a whole lot different than just a no hitter.
Right.
And then I was
Obviously.
playing second base. Yeah, and I was playing second base for that game, and ended up. I think it's 20. So outs 20. So I got ground balls in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. So I got ground ball in the 7th. I think the 20th out. Or 21st, the last out of the 8th, and then the first ground ball and the first out of out 25 of the 9th. So, a lot of it was a blur only because it was such a mentally draining night.
Right.
I mean, for Randy to go out and for the first 3 or 4 innings, dominate like he did, that wasn't new, right? I mean, that was the cool part about, when I've played behind him before, all right, Randy's, he's got it going on. But
right.
There was just something different, when you look at again, Robbie Hammock, my best friend, when you kind of watch highlights of that game, I mean, Robbie put the mitt up and it wasn't moving much off of that mitt. And then
now that I remember,
Randy
yeah.
at the time, he was beat up. Yeah, he was beat up and he was hurt. I mean, he's getting, this gel injections in his knee and bone on bone. So I mean, he wasn't 100%, but again,
Right.
the way that the glove was popping. I mean, you're looking at the swings these guys are taking, and it's okay. And so then you get into the 5th, and and then really it was the 6th for me when you kind of either look up at the scoreboard and you take a second while you're hitting and about to go on defense, ooh, oh, okay, this is nobody's got on base, nobody's got a hit, and so naturally the mind always tends to go to the negative. And so, now that self-talk of what you're starting to think about. So, I'm natural. I'm not going to say oh, it didn't happen. And I was, but it did happen. But then immediately, I tell people I must have said, hit it to me, hit it to me, hit it to me a million times. I didn't give my mind an inch of room to think about, oh, what if I made an error or what if whatever. And so I literally, when I'm on defense, it was hit it to me, hit it to me, hit it to me. I didn't even care about my at bats. I think I may have gotten an at bat, during those last 3 innings. I didn't care because I just wanted to get back out there and just, make whatever play I had to make. And so sure enough, I get ground balls. I mean, the ground balls that guys got. I joke with some of the guys who I'm, still buddies with. Obviously, Cintron and Robbie
Right.
Hammock, Chad Tracy is a good friend, and
Right.
your ground ball in the 2nd and 3rd. Even though it was a nice play, you had no clue. It was just another ground ball, but that ground ball off of Mark DeRosa's bat in the in the bottom of the ninth was way different than than any of the other ones before that. So it was yeah, it was so awesome. And then you look at the highlights of that, and obviously I throw my glove up after that last out. He struck out Eddie Perez, and you
So did
sprint
Hammock.
up to him, and yeah,
So did
yeah. Oh,
Hammock.
Robbie, yeah, Robbie. Obviously, that was great. He was just going crazy, and to get a smile from Randy was like was a huge feat in itself. So he had a big smile. But then I tell people like that was probably the biggest. I played basketball in high school. That was probably I wish I had a basketball in my hand because I would have threw it down on a 10-foot hoop because Randy's obviously close to 7 foot, and I had to jump up
Right.
on top of him. So between the adrenaline of that and then having to jump up and try to get on Randy's shoulders, yeah. So it was it was great.
Did you guys party hard all night after that? Did you guys party
Yeah, I
as a
mean,
team?
you know, they had some champagne, afterwards, and I think, Randy, it was just another night for him, and I mean, he downplayed it big time, and so there wasn't anything other than guys hanging out, for a while, and I had my sister at the time was living in Atlanta area, and so we had actually, and then my wife was in town for that trip, just knowing my sister was there, so they were both at the game, and got to see it live, which was awesome, obviously for them. So stuck around and celebrate a little bit. But yeah, for Randy, it was just nothing real special, and just another game for him.
Now I know this is a myth, but to baseball players, it's not. When a guy is throwing a no hitter or perfect game, is it really true? Like to have these instincts of not talk to the guy. The guy is all separate than himself. Just let him be. Is that how you guys were with Randy? You just let him be on the bench to clear his thoughts, whatever, and not talk to him while this is going on? Because I know that's a myth with every no hitter or perfect game going on. You see that a lot where the players won't even interact with the pitcher. So is that what you guys did with Randy?
Well, I think all that stuff is real. Call it superstition. I think that's just the nature of the game of baseball. When we've seen it a few times this year when guys are getting to that point where like, okay, now it's time to think about this. I think naturally guys are you know going to do the same thing. So I think if you talk to the guys who are on the bench, you know at some point they were sitting next to the same guy who they had been sitting next to. Bob Brenly, the manager at the time, tells a great story that he started getting in the routine, and it was actually my bat. He would stand next to the bat rack, and he was tapping my bat, and he would look for that bat. So that was a cool story on his part. But from a starting pitcher standpoint, like I think the great part about that game with Randy Johnson is perfect game or not, nobody really talked to Randy when he, on games that he pitched because he was so focused. So it was just like a regular, day from that standpoint. Because there's some pitchers who are, really laid back and loose, and you're going over and messing with them. Like Randy, you didn't do any of that. So like that part, guys didn't have to worry about, messing with a starting pitcher because they didn't talk to him anyway, even when he was giving up hits or it wasn't a perfect game or that was already, already gotten out of the way early in the game. You just still never talk to him, sort of thing. So, they didn't have to, but I knew, the guys were, doing the typical things, sitting next to, the same guys, all those basic stories you have about, any superstitions.
So now I got to ask you. Obviously, you didn't get a chance to play um, in on this version of the unis for the Diamondbacks that they changed in '07 to the current ones because you played with the old unis. You as a Diamondback, because you played longest for them and are alum there mainly. Which version of the unis do you like better? The throwbacks, which you were a part of, the '07 ones up until I think 15 or 16, to what they have now, which version of the unis do you like better? And don't be biased and say yours because you played with those, but which ones do you honestly think are better?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love whatever they call that red, a desert red or whatever color it is. Um, uh, I don't love that color. I like their whites where it has it's not like a turquoise, but it's kind of like a some sort of blue green turquoise type thing, and it has the subtle red in it. I think it's just those home whites. Watching the game the other night, or just every morning, I kind of watch the recaps of the night before on MLB TV. But I don't mind those. And even though like at the time, what the Rockies and the D-backs were, the teams that had purple in them. I think the Marlins were the other team that has that, tealish,
Yeah,
type
teal.
color. And so you're like, oh, purple, purple color. But, I am partial, to it. I think we had some clean looks. I'm a pinstripe guy. That was the first time I ever wore we had the sleeveless,
Yeah,
jersey as
yeah,
one of them. We had the long, home. We had we had the black um, alternate that we, mostly wore on the road. I think those were pretty clean. So, you know, I am biased, but I think, yeah, I definitely like and I think they still throw those in the mix. A lot of teams
yeah.
that make the
I like when they
transition,
do that. When teams, yeah, I like when teams do that because right now the Rays are doing the throwback Devil Rays. They've
yeah.
been for a
And
couple years.
I think,
The
I think,
Marlin,
the fan base appreciates it. And I mean, you know, it's as you kind of, obviously when you get away from the game and, for a period there, last couple of years or, for 7 years, I worked for, went back home and worked for the Indians. And, I always knew as a player, it was, this game was about the fans. Without any fans, I'm not able
right?
to play or get
And
paid
you don't get paid. Yeah,
essentially. And
you don't
so,
get,
I
yeah,
think again, I think that was just some really good veterans, really making that a point, and I was always just a, guy who signed autographs and gave fans the time in the minor leagues and, even in the big leagues. And so, those things, being able to appeal to, the older fan who likes, like the ones who probably were complaining when they upgraded, because that's the challenge now, especially in the game where I mean, you're seeing it a little bit in MLB. Not that I love everything the commissioner is doing to try to attract, the new younger fan, which was, we know, call them whatever, Gen Z, X, whatever it is. It's a
right.
challenge to because there's so much competition out there for, obviously the dollars or their eyeballs. And so, if you can, you know, attract a little bit with a different type of uniform, or they're doing those City Connect jerseys, which I think most of them are pretty cool, and hearing how they're a logo and how they're incorporating aspects of of the city or the community. So I mean, little things like that I'm about. Maybe some of the rules not so much, but it yeah,
Yeah,
I like the
yeah, I
old
like your
school.
guys's. Yeah, I like your guys's ones. I think it's tan. It's like a tannish, and it's got what is it, serpent or whatever it is. The City Connect ones. I like your City Connect ones.
Yeah, I think those are good. I asked my son, we were talking about it the other night, the Rangers, they revealed their new ones
This year,
this
yeah.
year. They're kind of cool. They're like two-toned. The Astros, obviously being a former Astro, I think those might be
The,
my favorites.
the Space
Um,
Connect ones, I think, or whatever they call them, or
yeah,
something.
yeah. Yeah, those are super cool. But again, it's it's the marketing side. It's the fan affinity, which again is really it's really important.
So, unfortunately, I have to ask you this because I ask everybody that played in this era, which is now my era too, because I grew up in it. Uh, The steroid era. You played in it, unfortunately, and I unfortunately lived it. I gotta ask you, in your clubhouses and the players that you played against, did you think, honestly, in your opinion, you don't have to say who, you can name names if you want. Did you think players were juicing from what you saw?
I mean, yeah. I mean, at this point, there's so much out, between either guys, testing positive and telling the world that they're sorry. They made a mistake, which, that's the biggest thing that I don't love about that. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And, if you came up in that era, we all had choices. I played double A year in El Paso, and, 20 minutes away was, Juarez and the border. And, I was one of three guys on that team that probably weren't going over the border and doing something, right? We were there. I mean, when I look back at that roster, there's three guys, and I was one of them who weren't on stuff. And so, when you knew guys were doing it, or when you kind of come in and in '99, I mean, obviously it had been going on in some form or fashion on some level, and then obviously, as technology and things get better, it was just a different level, as you heard, as everything kind of came out. Um, but ultimately, it was a choice, and for me, when you heard about that and you saw guys, I mean, the stories of guys coming back, to spring train the next year, and just their head is bigger, and obviously, you put on size. I mean, putting on, and I trained at the best places in the country as far as, strength and conditioning. And I mean, I gained, gaining 20 pounds of muscle, naturally, is almost like impossible thing to do, and so I gained, 7, 8 pounds of muscle, and the right way, and it was hard. And I mean, I didn't look much different. Everyone came into spring training like, oh, you lifted a lot, and you did some stuff. And but there were guys definitely that were coming in, pretty big. And ultimately for me, it was, as you kind of, had some of those conversations, and I never saw like some people say, oh, they were in the bathroom injecting. I never saw any of that stuff, but you knew guys were doing it. And it was a choice for me. I mean, I was certainly faced with the choice to do it. And you saw some of those guys who were maybe good players, and that made them great, or who were, had decent, talent that kicked them up a level. And so, I just knew it was something that, I think, just the way that I was raised, and I wouldn't be able to just, when it's all said and done, look in the mirror and say, man, I did it right. And so, I did it right, and it was a personal, choice. And I think, it just made it, a little more fulfilling, knowing that, it wasn't necessarily a level playing field, but I still was able to, make it, and, spend a little bit of time up there. And I'm okay with that. A lot of guys, will make the comment of like, man, I mean, looking back, I probably should have done it, or I would have, if I would have done it, I would have made it, I would have signed that contract, or, whatever it is. Like you know, I'm, I'm, I'm cool with that.
Now, two-part question. Me, I consider it cheating, even though around that time they weren't testing for it. I still consider it cheating. Do you consider it cheating? And what do you say to the people that say, oh, yeah, they can do it because ultimately you still have to see the ball to hit the ball, which I get that, but still ultimately it's still cheating because you're enhancing your body. And two, the second part of the question is, I think it hurt. I'm half and half on this. I think it hurt the game, and it also helped the game. The home run chase before you came in with McGuire and Sosa, yes, that helped the game, but also I think hurt the game. Your take on that as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I do. I mean, at the time, I mean, obviously, when McGuire's doing the interview and he's got, Andro or whatever in the bottle behind him, over his right shoulder. Um, I mean, if something technically isn't illegal, it's hard for me to say that at that time it was cheating, right? Because I think in any sport throughout history, I mean, at that point too, guys were taking amphetamines back in the 20s and 30s. It goes back to, where like if you ask me, that's cheating because that means I can go out all night and I saw all this firsthand, and I wasn't in it, and they call them greenies. Like I wasn't that guy, and I mean, you can go out all night, you're tired from playing every day, but you come to the field the next day and you pop one. I mean, some guys are going crazy with it, but take that amphetamine and you're good to go for the game. I think that's probably the biggest thing that, even more so than steroids, you weed out of the game. That weeded guys out because now you have to like take your recovery and your sleep. It's those are really important, and you're seeing that in the game now because it's out of the game, and you can't take any of those. That's such an important part of it. And so I think that's probably was one of the biggest adjustments. But I at the time when it wasn't, what is all this, and they weren't you know testing for it, and it technically wasn't illegal. I mean, I think athletes throughout history are always going to look for some sort of competitive advantage, whether or not it's trying to be bigger, faster, stronger. But then obviously once it got put into place, and guys knew, and at that time the user was always going to be ahead of the tester. And if you obviously had enough money to be able to do it, the Lance Armstrongs and the guys who ended up doing it obviously had money, and I think even when everything with the whatever the TTC or whatever they called it, back in the day, someone had to provide them a sample of that to be able to create the test around it, right? So like the user was always going to be ahead of the tester type of thing. And so again, it's even though it wasn't, I can sit here and say, well, yeah, it's not fair, it impacted me, it hurt me, but again, it was a choice. And then once obviously they put testing and everything into place, you can say that it's more of a level playing field. And then now they're getting sticky stuff out of the game too. That was something that you would kind of see randomly, that like, hitting's already tough, man. You start giving pitchers some steroids for recovery and some strength, and then add to it, whatever they're putting on the ball. That part of it is, maybe not as fair as a hitter. But yeah, I mean, it was an era. I think my son did an eighth grade thesis of just, now you talk about the Hall of Fame, and there's some obviously really good players, because you mentioned it too. The thing about steroids was it doesn't cure a crappy swing. I saw many guys who had really bad swings, who they just looked really good. They looked really good getting jammed or walking back to the dugout after striking out again. They just looked bigger in their uniform. But it didn't cure a bad swing. But obviously, when you had a good swing, and I mean, we know kind of some of those examples, and when you have a good swing, it just makes it that much better. When you add, a little bit of strength and a little bit of the benefits of what steroids do for you. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, because I think at some point you're leaving too many names, and it was an era. And I think if you can just recognize it in some way, but I think it's, I don't know where I would have to put a stake in. And I think my son argued that they shouldn't be allowed in the Hall of Fame, which I think you can make a case for. But I think you'd also make a case for a separate, era where, these guys maybe get recognized. But I realize that, you start doing that, and then you start opening up a can to, address, some of the other, obviously Pete Rose being, the main one. So, I think it just goes to, I think it just goes to the integrity of the game. And I think, my thing is I don't love some of the recent inductees into the Hall of Fame because it's a Hall of Fame. It's I'm definitely it's not the Hall of really good or very good, and I think it's you start kind of letting some of the ones that maybe fall a little bit below the line, and then you move the bar a little bit, and then ultimately it just kind of you know opens up some other things to have to kind of address. So yeah,
I agree. I agree.
it's an interesting one.
So a couple more questions and I'll let you go because I know I gotta get going. I know you gotta get going too. You're busy as well. That's why we had to schedule it during the day because you're always busy just like I am. So
That's right. That's right.
we finally got it, but finally I'm having a great time and I hope you are too. So let's get this going. I'll ask these two questions and then I'll let you go. The first one is, yeah, you talked a little about it with Manfred and the rules he's implemented. Um, I think it's honestly stupid that they had to implement this because around your time when you were playing, the 90s, the 80s, players itself, they didn't care. It's hard for me to say this to put the words together, but I think you're going where I'm going with this. They didn't need this BS with the pitch clock and all this, adjusting the gloves, the length of times. They didn't. They player. You can contest this because you were a player yourself. You guys didn't care about that, like this sort of stuff. You guys didn't need to implement this sort of stuff, but players today did it to themselves because coaches and owners have allowed them. I know that he wants to change the pace of game, but this is what happens when you let players dictate the pace of play, correct? Because you guys, like I said, didn't care about it.
Yeah, and I think I mean, there's going back to like who was it? I think it was Mike Hargrove. Mike Hargrove or Steve Garvey, who their nickname was like the human rain delay, right? They kind of adjust in the
Yeah.
batting gloves. I think it was Mike Hargrove. So and then the big one that stands out was like Nomar Garcia Parra, who kind of would step out and do all the things like. So I
Yeah.
think there were those few outliers, but I think as a whole, because it is interesting to see, when you go on Twitter or whatever, somebody compare like from the last couple years, and I forget who it was, like basically the difference, and like a pitch wasn't even thrown versus a whole inning. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
got finished with. But like for me, I think the unique thing about baseball is it's the one of the sports that there isn't a clock, and you know you can go to a game and it's an intimate experience, whether or not it's by yourself with with a good friend, with your dad, right? When I think about my first Indians game and the moments the memories that we created,
Right.
it's especially nowadays where, people are staring at their phones and, have all this distraction, to go and, whatever it is, 3 hours, obviously the time, just to kind of get away and, you know, what everything else in the world that was going on to just kind of have something take your mind off things like a 2.5 hour movie or whatever it is. And so that's the part that I just I don't love, that now there's some aspect of time within the game. I and at the same time, being a part of a major league team for those 7 years with the Indians, and on the business side, seeing and hearing and being involved in some of those meetings on, how do we grow the game. We had the All-Star game in 2019 with the Indians that I was, able to be a part
I
of. And
remember
so
that.
you're
Yep.
meeting for a year with MLB and preparing and planning for this. And so, my role with the Indians, I oversaw all their youth baseball and softball development. So for me, focused on grassroots and obviously growing the game and growing, the fan essentially at a young age, when there's a lot of the competition for, just attention, it was a challenge. And so, I also understand those conversations. And then data doesn't lie. They obviously lean on a lot of the data and attendance and, all the things, that go along with it. So, I realize the need to, focus on a certain age group and get them and grow them as fans, because the thing about baseball is, and that was my focus in if you can at an early age, because here's the reality. I mean, you have kids 7 and 3, like baseball's, and even softball, they're freaking hard games. It's not an easy game. You know what I mean? And on top of that, it's not the most exciting game. Everyone loves to laugh at the 3 and 4-year-old T-ball games where there's 14 kids on a field and, 12 of them are, building dirt piles and picking daisies, and everyone thinks it's cute, at first. But the reality is it's, if you're not, changing the game a little bit from a format standpoint, like I'm sure you guys, maybe you've done soccer and stuff. Soccer, it's 4v4 and the field's smaller, and they make, hockey, they do all these things because it's like you're not big yet. So like you shouldn't be playing on the big field. And so, baseball, I think, that was at least where I felt like I could make an impact, because if you can maybe make some tweaks to how the game is to where it's exciting for them. They're increasing the amount of reps and being able to play. Because here's the thing, your kids aren't going out in the neighborhood and just playing and coming back when it's dinner time, right? The old school, it's how I grew up. It's how, a lot of that generation grew up, where it's just you're playing free play. You're getting with your three,
Right.
four buddies. Yep. You're making up games. You're making up rules. Those days are gone. Everything's structured, and unfortunately you're paying, thousands of dollars just to be able to like have an experience playing that ultimately isn't a great experience. And so, you lose a lot of kids, after those T-ball years, because it's not really that fun, and they'd rather go to, kick a, run around and kick a ball around and play soccer, or, lacrosse is kind of making its way as a major sport. You get to, put on some pads and a stick and whack people and run around. Right. So there's some competition there. And so, it was, those conversations, just how can we kind of just kind of latch on to and create, a fan for life. And, I mean, I think it's a combination, not that every fan of baseball has to have played it, but I think if you can kind of have some interaction with, a parent or, a guardian that, whether it's having a catch or going to a game or just having a good experience signing up in your local rec, and it takes you however long it takes you, but it was a positive one. A lot of the things that I focused on, when I was with the Indians too, was coach development. I think you hear so many unfortunate stories where, a kid has a really negative experience with a coach who either is, super negative, who's, yells a lot or whatever, and obviously doesn't make it fun, for a kid. So now they see, man, they connect baseball and this really, bad coach. And so they're not going to be a fan, of baseball, for the rest of their life. So we did a lot of work in making sure that just, the coaches who are just, really big hearted moms and dads, to just give them, at least some tools that they can kind of create a good environment so that ultimately the kid has a great experience and sees baseball or softball as, as a positive thing. And then, that helps to grow the fan and want to go out and see the Indians and, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's a challenge for sure. And, I don't think we need to get into it. Do we have, is the right person kind of leading that challenge, and some of those decisions, but, I think the thing is they're making some decisions, they're trying out some things, and, and you're always going to have people who don't, agree with everything and push back. And so, it was great. I think they had some data over the weekend with Father's Day weekend or whatever, like attendance is up. I think it's really good for the game that, you're seeing, teams like obviously the Rangers, teams like the Orioles, right? The AL East isn't just either the Red Sox or the Yankees anymore. You got a really competitive division there, and even the Diamondbacks obviously leading the division now. So it's not the same old teams. And you even heard Joey Cora or not Joey Cora, Alex Cora, the other night saying, man, back to back Sunday night baseballs for the Red Sox, like that's not good for the game. I mean, obviously those are the bigger market teams, and they're the ones that are most recognizable. But I think it's really good for the game, to showcase some of those other teams, and then players, and that sort of thing. Because I think the last thing I'll touch on is man, kids, I mean, back in the day, you had your favorite player. I mentioned my favorite players. You went to games, or you watched them on TV. My question, I'm volunteering, I'm helping coach with my son's organization now, and I always like to ask the kids, who their favorite player is, because I know if a kid can't tell me his favorite player, that means he's not engaged in the game. He doesn't watch baseball. So as a coach, it makes it a little harder to coach, because you can't say, hey, how Jose Ramirez holds his hands, or that sort of thing, or so and so pitches. You can't use that as like a reference point. And so just watching the game and observing, you can learn so much. And again, with the phones and the competition for that attention is so great now, that I get it. Sitting down to either watch a game on TV is it's hard for anyone, and I think that's why it makes the experience going to the game, where you kind of have to deplug, even though you look at a crowd and everyone's still on their phones within the game, at the game. I think that's where you really impact the game, is at those young ages. So I know they're doing things, and it's those are big tasks and things, but I think some good things are in place, and hopefully it just continues to grow the next generation of fans in baseball.
I hope so. I really hope so, and I agree with you on that. So I'll leave you off on this. It's a two-part question. We didn't get to talk about your other teams, which was the Phillies, the Rangers, and the Astros. You briefly brought that up. Your time with them, your experience with them, what you think about playing there. And the second part is um, a totally random topic of today in today's game. What do you think? Do you think baseball, basically the ownership and the commissioner itself, has given up baseball in Oakland as a whole? Like they don't have faith in Oakland at all.
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, as far as the teams go, I mean, I'll always have a natural love for the Diamondbacks. I spent the most time with them. I was traded in '05 to the Phillies. Even though I didn't play much, in those 2.5 months, it was still exciting to one, be teammates with. I mean, Jim Thome, who was hurt at the time, but still Jim Thome, who I grew up, watching, former Indian. Kenny Lofton, again, former Indian. You know, being able to take ground balls and learn from Chase Utley, who we kind of came up at the same time and played against. But that was a Jimmy Rollins, and some serious veterans who, again, even though I was just a bench guy, I think I got 6 total at bats. Um, some great teammates, some great coaches that I learned a ton from, and we were in the playoff race, which again, meaningful baseball is always exciting. Philadelphia, everything you hear about it is true. David Bell was our third baseman. Ultimate gamer, I think his nickname, they called him Ball Game. I mean, ultimate gainer. The guy played the whole year with like stress fractures in his back. I mean, he never sat down during a game. He could have made the last out of the game, came back in after playing defense. He didn't just sit on the bench and watch. He like put his helmet on and had to go down to the cages and just keep swinging a bat, or his back would lock up. And so when I found that out, and then obviously that impacted his game a little bit, but he was a really good third baseman. But you make some errors and stuff, and I mean, the fans in Philly were, I mean, they were they were, they were relentless, man. They didn't, they got on you. So, I mean, he was playing with, cotton balls in his ears at home, and so it was great to just, be a part of another like playoff run. We went to the last game of the season. We had to win, and the Astros, who were in the National League, they had to lose, and we would have went to the 1-game playoff, but we won, and the Astros won, so that means they moved on. So that was fun, and then got to spend some time, a little bit of time with the Rangers. I think the coolest part about breaking camp with them, that was kind of Sammy Sosa's like pseudo comeback, and we kind of had a little bit of a connection. I love telling this story because, I talked about growing up, imitating Julio Franco's swing and just watching the game. And I mean, you could have told me to imitate anyone and I would have been able to. And, Sammy Sosa was one of those guys who had a obviously really unique batting stance and, hands out and, all the craziness and the step back. And so, when he was in spring training that year, I mean, if you didn't know that was Sammy Sosa, you'd be like, if you didn't know it was Sammy Sosa, you'd be able to recognize him by his stance, but his stance was like changed. And so, he makes the team, and I remember we were we opened up in Anaheim, and so being a bench guy, around the third or fourth inning, you kind of start to get loose. You go down to the cages and start swinging a little bit. Well, I was down there and hitting off the tee or whatever, and Sammy, who was he was DH, and he comes down there, and I mean, Sammy, I mean, he was the guy, right? He ran Chicago, so he's probably used to people doing stuff for him and getting his way. And I remember, I'm hitting off the tee, and there's one cage, and he comes in and basically just says, "Hey, flip to me, throw to me," And so of course I'm just like, whatever. It's Sammy Sosa, sure. He's in the game, I'm not, and so I'm flipping to him, but the typical like underhand front toss and with the screen, and like this guy who has close to 600 home runs at the time, like I mean he's like rolling over, popping up. I mean he's not even hitting balls hard, so it was like and it wasn't his swing. So again, who am I to like all of a sudden say what the heck's going on, Sammy? And so it really was though. The next inning was the same thing, right? I didn't get in that game. The next inning, the same thing. I'm flipping balls to this guy who's and so finally I just said I just asked him like, Sammy, like when did you change your swing? And he had no clue. He's like, what do you mean, Poppy? What do you mean? And I was like, man, your swing's a little different. Did you and the hitting coach, Rudy Jaramillo, I said, did you guys change your swing? And he goes, no. So I'm just like, wow, this guy who has close, he'll end up hitting a 600 home run, that season, doesn't know that his swing is dramatically different from what he's just used to for all those years. So I kind of then grabbed a bat because he was like, show me. And so I grabbed a bat, and I could again I could do Sammy better than Sammy could do Sammy. And so then, but when I did that and he saw me, like, I remember it, like his eyes were like, oh my gosh, that is me, and so, then he kind of like starts changing things. Well, he kind of ends up tweaking a little thing, and next thing you know, he starts hitting a little bit because he didn't hit home runs in spring training. I think he just made the team just for the name and the fans. And so, anyway, like he starts hitting a little bit, hitting a couple homers, and then next thing he's like, I'm like his, personal like hitting guy. Like he's making sure that like during BP when I'm trying to get ready for games, like I'm not hitting when he's hitting, and I get to go and be with him. And so finally, like the hitting coach is like, hey, what's going on? I thought I was in trouble. Like, oh man, I'm talking hitting with him, and the hitting coach, I was like, man, Rudy, I'm sorry, man. We were just talking hitting, and blah, blah. He goes, I don't care, kid. Tell me what you're telling them or whatever. So, that was my cool. That was my cool story with the Rangers. It was really cool. It was really cool to play with the Pirates. A big hit. Yeah, big big history guy. So my time with the Pirates was awesome because that's by far is one of the top top stadiums and yards in the game. In my opinion, I think a lot of guys who played there would say the same thing. And that was the year that I came over halfway, and um, I mean I played really well, like hit 250 off the bench. I thought that was going to be my year where I at least go to arbitration, sign a little bit of a bigger contract, that type of thing. But Jim Tracy, the manager at the time, he got fired at the end of the year. The GM got fired, new regime, and
Yeah.
I kind of got, pushed out. And then,
Yeah, you got pushed out.
yeah. And then, the Astros, it was, shoot, it could have been anywhere, man, to wear a big league uniform. But, to play a little bit where I got my first hit and first homer, and, great town, cool, cool ballpark at the time, my kids in 2009. So I signed with the Astros, as a, minor league invite, don't make the team. But my kids that year were born February 9th, and 3 days later, I'm leaving for spring training. So, AAA was Round Rock here, where we're at now. So I knew worst case scenario, I have, two newborns, twins. I'm either, a couple hours away playing in Houston, or, living at home, playing in
Yeah.
AAA. So, the
Yep.
timing of that and everything was, was great, because that year I ended up spending half the year in Houston, and half the year in Round Rock. So, I'm not driving around, across country and putting my wife and kids on flights, or, so
Right.
I'm always able to kind of still see them and be a part of that. So, that was the cool part about, you know, uh, playing there. So, yeah, man, I mean, when you look back, I mean, 14 years, it was awesome, and a lot of times when I talk about it, I hesitate, you don't want to sound like it's, it's a bragging thing, but it was so awesome. Um, and being a kid from Cleveland, Ohio, and being able to, again, knowing the odds and the chances are slim to none.
Exactly.
I loved every minute of it. And, and then for me, I love, now my son's super engaged and asking a lot of questions. And then I'm able to, do what those veteran, players and coaches did for me, and just to be able to kind of give back and share some of the things, that I learned, that hopefully can kind of help them, and, help them, be the best that they can be. But ultimately just have them, just have a real love for the game, and, yeah. And then, move on. But like everything you hear, man, I mean, I think that, baseball is such a unique sport, and it provides, so many life lessons and opportunity when you think about life, right? I mean, the failure that's ingrained in it, the adversity, there's really no other sport like it, right? I mean, if you're failing 70% of you're failing 70% of the time, and you're an all-star. I mean, there's not very many jobs other than maybe a weatherman in Cleveland or Texas here, where you fail so much that and get paid for it. So I think that's certainly what I'm grateful for, because now as I transition, in a completely different industry, I'm in the banking world now. Those same lessons, that same process and focus from a work ethic, from a routines, and just being able to deal with the highs and lows, and everything. Baseball taught me that, and I'm still utilizing those in kind of this next chapter. So yeah, awesome game, as you know.
For sure, without a doubt. It is like a trial triple. I know I wanted to play it. I just know I wasn't talented enough, because I tried Little League. I wanted to play it, but yeah, you're right. It's just a trial. It's got its highs and it's got its lows. You just got to be willing to sacrifice a lot. And at the time, I wanted to, but I just wasn't willing to. Like, has its highs and lows. Like you said, it's a game. Even though
Yep, for sure, man, for sure.
even, even though it's my favorite sport and it's been my favorite sport for years, I just knew I just knew I didn't have the talent. No matter how much work I could put in, if I wanted to, at the time when getting out of high school / college, when I was still in Little League, even if I put in the work, I knew I I just didn't have the talent. I couldn't. I always played outfield. I couldn't really see the ball well enough to track the field. I wasn't fast enough. I saw the ball at the plate. I just couldn't hit it. So like, and I was working on my swing all the time. It's just
Yeah. Well, I
it's just
mean, the last thing I always, tell kids or talk about. I mean, I think everything you said right there is the reason why, there's a lot of players that I played with. There's a lot of players out there that, they're not playing anymore, but they're at the bar and they're looking at the TV and saying, man, if I would have just, if this coach wouldn't have screwed me, or if I would have just worked harder. And so for me, I saw and heard that, and I wanted to make sure that however long it was, right, and I was so grateful it was 14 years that I wasn't that guy, that I could honestly look in the mirror and say, man, I did everything I could. I left nothing on the table, no stone, unturned,
exactly,
and that was it, and there's no regrets, no
exactly,
anything. So, um, I think you know, that's what the goal was. And, I'm again, that's what makes it easy getting up now and, doing what I'm doing now, which, the beauty is, man, in this next chapter, I just love helping people, whether it's coaching or what I'm doing now. I'm able to help a person with their business and help them grow and help them, kind of reach their, life goals and financial needs. So I think, even though it's not baseball, I think that's what, gets me up every morning and, doing, excited to do what I do now.
exactly. And kudos to you. And I hope whoever you train, they listen and you tell them like you told me, like straight up, and you help them get to where they want to be. If it's baseball, whatever they want to do, and hope they listen to you. I mean, because yeah, like I said, I tried everything. I listened to everybody. I listened to all my coaches. I listened to everybody, and I just knew I just couldn't do it. No matter how much I worked at it, I tried listening to everybody. I tried changing up everything. Yeah, I was just one of those many people out there that I could swing. I just couldn't hit the ball or field it in the field. So I realized. I mean, so, but yeah, I hope kids out there get help from you and actually listen to you. But yeah, you keep doing what you're doing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Last
I
last
go
thing
ahead.
I'll say, like, I know you're a baseball fan, but we talked about. I mean, I always think imitation's the best teacher, and I could do Julio, I could do anyone growing up, Sammy, but then Nolan Ryan from a pitching standpoint was, I mean,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
guy from a pitcher. But I got this little poster. Have you seen this documentary yet? If you haven't, you got to see it. But
I
I
have
was so
not. No.
fortunate to play. They filmed some of the documentary here in Round Rock, and
Uh,
I got to play. That's me on the cover, actually. But I got to play. They
oh, look
had
at
old.
you,
Yeah,
Mr.
so they had old Nolan. Yeah, they had old Nolan from the Rangers and the Astros, and they had a kid play younger Nolan from the Mets and the Angels years. But
Look at you.
you know, I would. It's on net. Yeah, it's on Netflix. I would absolutely
Yeah, I'll
watch
have
it
to check it
tonight because
out.
it's an unbelievable documentary. And yeah, and it just kind of, you knew Nolan Ryan was a good, obviously a good a good player, but when you hear the stories and at the end
Yeah.
they kind of roll through some of his records and stats, it's just mind blowing. I mean, how good he was. But great documentary. Definitely
I'll definitely
recommend
check
it for
it out.
sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll check it out. Hey,
Yeah.
maybe you got a now life in acting. There you go.
Oh shoot, no, no lines, and most of my stuff got cut out. But I got the cover. I got the cover, so I guess that's the most.
Okay,
And
well,
I didn't have to get. I didn't have to get Tommy John because I think we filmed all night,
there you
like
go.
6:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning, and I probably threw. I probably threw. 200 pitches. I'd be going to jail if I was the coach in Little League letting a kid throw 200 pitches. But yeah, No, I maybe couldn't wipe my what as well the next day, but it was all worth it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't blame you. It was fun, definitely. I had a blast. I'll send. You got the links. I don't have to send anything over.
Yeah,
But actually, I will. I'll send you because what I sent you was all the episodes, but I'll send you your episode personally if you want to share that as well. And I'll still be texting you here and there as well to stay in touch. But
yeah, for sure, man. I enjoyed it, and I'm like I said,
I
happy
did
to share.
for sure. I did too, because you're the longest I've had somebody on for, and I had a blast doing it. So it was fun. I definitely appreciate your time. It was fun. If you know
Well,
anybody,
I listened to a little bit of the Gray Maynard actually, and he actually went to my rival high school. When I saw that name, I was like, oh, I know that guy. I think
really,
I maybe had a run in or two at a party. But yeah, he went to the rival high school, St. Ed's, and I went to St. Ignatius. But I knew he was a good wrestler, and then had his time in MMA. So I saw that, and I was like, oh, nice. You
yeah.
probably shouldn't. If you told him, "Hey, I'm about to have a future Ignatius Wildcat guy on the next
Oh, he's up
episode," he probably would. Well, depending on who you are. I mean, big rival. He might have said, "Oh, I don't know about that choice,"
that.
but I'll
But yeah.
forgive you for getting an Ed's guy on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Nice.
But yeah, I'll definitely stay in touch. And if you know anybody, like you said, if you know reach out to your friends. I mean, I'm always looking for more. If you have anybody else that wants to come on, bring them on. So
Yeah, for
have to
sure,
reach out
for
to
sure.
me. I'll stay in touch with you. And if, like I said, if you're ever in Florida, let me know so we can meet up. If you're ever in Florida,
Will do.
awesome.
All right,
Thank
Byron.
you. You have a good day. All right. I appreciate your
Yep.
time. It was fun. I'll
You,
send you the
yeah,
episode.
sounds good. Take care, man. Appreciate it.
You too. Have a good day.
Bye.
Matt Kata, everybody, former